Okay, so now that our design is ready, we need to go ahead and register a new user using Firebase Authentication. So to do that, the first thing we need to do will be to add a text editing controller to our text fields. The text controllers or the text editing controllers will help us collect the inputs that we provide in the application. So our registration page has 4 inputs, so we need to define 4 different text controllers. So I'm going to have a full name controller. So this is going to be equal to text editing controller. So we need to go ahead and do the same thing for email, phone number, and password. Okay, now the next thing we need to do will be to assign these controllers that we defined to the appropriate text fields. So I'm going to drop this down. So for our full name, I'm going to go ahead and assign the controller. So this is going to be full name. So I'm going to pass full name controller here. For our email address, we're going to have email controller, and for our phone number, we're going to have phone controller, and for our password, we're going to have our password controller. Alright, so now that we have that, the next thing we need to do will be to proceed and do the registration. So to ensure that everything is properly organized, I'm going to create a method that is going to take care of registering the user. So here I'm going to go ahead and say void register user. So now that we have the method, now the next thing we need to do is to proceed and do the registration proper. Registering a user is being handled by Firebase Authentication. So before we do anything, we need to first of all define a new instance of our Firebase Authentication. So this is going to be a final variable. So let's go ahead and define it here. So I'm going to have final Firebase Auth. So this is going to be equal to Firebase Auth.instance. The next thing we need to do is to go ahead and write the code that will actually go ahead and register our user. So the big question, what is the code that we're going to write? We can easily refer to Firebase Auth documentation from where we usually download Flutter packages. So I already have that opened up on my Google Chrome. So you just need to go to pub.dev/packages/Firebase Auth. So on the README page, if you scroll down, you can see that they have guidance on how you can go about making use of Firebase Authentication. So currently, you want to be able to register a user with email and password. So you can easily go ahead and copy all of this code. This is very simple. You can copy all of that code and paste it here. So this will go ahead and sign up our user, right? So instead of having an email and a password, we can just go ahead and replace this with input from our application. So here I can have email controller.test, and here I can have password controller.test. Now to confirm if the registration is successful or not, I can go ahead and say if user is not equal to null. So I can go ahead and print successful to the console, and also we'll be able to see our registration appear on Firebase console. But let's just go ahead and print out something so that we'll be able to know as well. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and make use of this method that we just created. So I'm going to drop this down. Where we have our register button, I'm going to go ahead and call the register user method. Alright, so what I'm going to do will be to go ahead and hot restart our application, and we are going to provide the necessary input and see if this actually works out. Okay, so now let's go ahead and provide the necessary input. So I'm going to have my full name. Alright, okay, so this is not accepting inputs, so I can just go ahead and launch our application from code. Okay, so now that we have our app ready, let's go ahead and provide the necessary input and try to register on our cab rider. So I'm going to have my name, and I'm going to provide my email address, and also I'm going to provide my phone number, and then I'm going to input my password. Then I'm going to click on register. So if we open the console, you can see that we have registration successful. And to confirm this, I can simply just go ahead and reload this page. So this will reveal all the users that has been successfully registered on this platform. Bam! As you can see, our registration is successful. So getting to this page is simply by clicking on the authentication tab and you will get here. So as you can see, this registration is very successful. Now, the next thing we need to do is to make the registration process much more smoother. Now, to ensure that our registration is up to standard, we need to kind of do some data validation or input validation before we proceed to do our registration. Let's say someone provides an invalid email address that doesn't have the @ sign. We shouldn't proceed and do the registration. We should just tell the user upfront that you have an invalid email address. So we need to kind of do all of that, and also we need to check if there is internet connectivity and all of that. So I'm going to scroll down to our register button, and we need to go ahead and do some form of data validation before we get to the point where we can go ahead and register the user. The first thing we need to do will be to check network availability. So we're going to come to that later. Now the next thing we need to do will be to check if the full name is at least up to 3 characters. So to do that, I'm going to say if full name controller.text.length is less than 3. So at this point, we need to kind of display a message to tell the user that you need to provide a valid full name. So to do that, we need to have a snack bar. So what I'm going to do will be to go to the top of our class, and I'm going to create a new method, and this method I'm going to call it show snack bar. So I'm going to be using the method to display messages in our snack bar. So to set up a snack bar, we'll need to have a global key. So I'm going to have final global key of type of scaffold state. So I'm going to call this scaffold key. So this is going to be equal to new global key. Alright, so I'm going to create a new method. I'm going to call it show snack bar. So this method is going to take in a parameter. So this parameter is going to be title. So here I'm going to go ahead and say final snack bar. So this should be equal to snack bar, and I'm going to go ahead and provide the content. The content is going to be a test widget, and the test is going to be our title. I'm going to set the test align. I'm going to set it to center, and of course I will need some style. I'm going to set the font size to 15, and the next thing I'm going to do will be to go ahead and say scaffold key dot current state dot show snack bar. I'm going to go ahead and pass in our snack bar. Alright, so this is what we want to do, and finally we're going to go ahead and set our scaffold key to our scaffold. So I'm going to have key here, and I'm going to pass in scaffold key. So this is how to enable our registration page to be able to display information using a snack bar. So now I'm going to return back to our registration button click event handler. So at this point, when the user provides an invalid full name, I can now go ahead and say show snack bar, and I can now say please provide a valid full name. And after that, I'm going to go ahead and exit this method. Now the next validation we need to do will be for phone number. Every valid phone number should be at least up to 10 digits. So I think this is okay. So if your phone number is below 10 digits, we're going to go ahead and tell you to provide a valid phone number. We also need to validate our email address. We need to ensure that our email address contains the @ sign. If it doesn't, we are going to tell you to provide a valid email address. Now the last thing we need to validate will be the password. We need the password to be at least 8 digits. In that way, we can have that sense of security there. So if your password is below 8 digits or 8 characters, we're going to tell you to provide a valid password. Alright, so this is all we need to do when it comes to data validation. So to confirm that this works, I'm just going to go ahead and just type in just a couple of characters in the full name test field. Let me go ahead and click on register and see what happens. So as you can see, you say please provide a valid full name. So let's say I provide a valid full name. So go ahead and click on register. You can tell me please provide a valid phone number because the phone number is empty. So the validation is very useful. In that way it limits us having errors on Firebase and things like that. So in the next lesson we're going to go ahead and finish up with the registration process. In that lesson we'll be able to see how to check for network internet connectivity and check for Firebase errors and also save users information after registration. So this will be all for now. See you in the next class.